Hello and welcome to the Knowing Show. I am your host, Christene Marie, and I am so privileged to be here with you all tonight. We are talking about something that probably could very well be one of the most important topics that you and I can address in our lifetime, and it really has to do with what is our purpose. And over the last couple of days, we've been discussing our identity and understanding the truth versus our experience. And the reason why all of that is so important to serve as kind of context and groundwork and I guess a foundation for this conversation is because if we're going to be operating from this place of seeking to live a fulfilling life and seeking to activate and live according to our own potential, well, it needs to be grounded on a firm foundation of knowing who we are, knowing whose we are and why we're here. And then the purpose is kind of speaking to that third part, which is the why we're here. But y'all, if we don't know who we are apart from external action, then we're going to misattribute and even just kind of blend the why with our who. And then we start thinking that we are the sum of all that we do for other people, the sum of what we do even for in a lot of Christian or religious senses, it's like what we're doing for God. And then our value becomes really placed on everything external and our doing rather than our being. And so when we can separate between our identity and that which we do and our kind of our purpose, then there's so much freedom to then start getting creative and curious about what our purpose might manifest as. Whereas, man, if our identity is wrapped up in what we do, then there's just a lot of fear there, because what if we do the wrong thing, or what if we make a mistake in how we spend our time or use our days? There's so much more pressure around our purpose if that is the thing that marks whether we're lovable or not, or someone worthy and somebody that's going to effectively be counted as kind of one of the lot, rather than recognizing, no, my foundation of my identity is that I am loved regardless of what happens, and who I am is unchangeable regardless of what I do. Now, what I do can either act in accordance with and kind of like supporting the truth of our identity, or it could actually kind of go away from it. You know, we talk about our identity in two different parts. We talk about part A, which is kind of the eternal part of us that is loved, that is cherished, that's chosen, that is unchangeable and impervious to what we do. And it's just always, 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 always loved. And that is in every single person. So this identity A, this part of our identity, actually allows for us to be very connected to one another, because we all share this attribute that's effectively God-given. That's the part of us that is like God, that is love. And then the second part of our identity B, so to say, both of which coming together allow for the full sum and totality of our identity. But identity B, that second part, is really actually what makes us so unique and so different from each other. So part A is the part that actually brings the continuity and brings the brotherly love and kind of that part of us that is all like God in us. And then part B, I actually think that there's still attributes of God there and like our creator, but it's so different from each other. And frankly, that part that makes us so different really speaks to our individual unique purpose. But it is only when we look at both of those two parts together and look at our identity as a whole that we can look at kind of the impervious nature of our identity and then simply say, okay, what does the manifestation of this known self look like in action, where, man, I am so filled up, I know who I am, and now I get to go live in service, and I get to give from an overflow rather than giving from a place of lack. And I heard that analogy for the first time. I was sitting in the back of the room at an event for Amazon that my partner and I were putting on together for them. It was 350 of their senior women leaders. And so I was sitting in the back of the room, and Lisa Nichols was in the front of the room, and she was standing on stage, and she has this glass basin, and she has a glass of water that she's holding, or an empty glass that she's holding above it, and then a pitcher full of water. And she pours half of the water into the glass, and she says, "So many of you give from this half-filled cup." And then she continued to pour the water into the cup, and she said, "Others of you will give from a full cup." And then she continued to pour and pour and pour, and the water spilled over into the basin. And then she said, others of you need to recognize that this cup, this full cup, is 100% for you. The overflow is for everybody else. So when we realize this, it completely and fundamentally changes the way that we show up, because once we know our identity, and kind of like the inner world is representative of that full cup, and then the overflow is the manifestation of our purpose. It's the way that we are giving to other people. It's the way that we show up in service and in love and support of others, but it's coming from the overflow of a known and healthy and joyous self, rather than us actually using other people to try to fill up those empty parts of us to begin with, to try to fill up or heal or supplement the things that we feel like are lacking. And so rather than me using friendship with somebody or me using service for somebody as a means of that's what I'm called to do, that's kind of my purpose in life. Instead, we can actually use that as a modality for selfishness, or as a modality of healing maybe something that was broken in us to begin with. I was talking to someone today, and we were talking, is it even possible to love without selfish intention or selfish motivation? Looking at kids, can we actually give freely to a child without the expectation of love in return? And maybe the answer is yes. But then the next question is, okay, for how long? If so, for how long? And love runs out if we're not doing the job to replenish it, if we're not doing the job to refill kind of those storehouses. So this example that Lisa Nichols gave at that Amazon event was so poignant, because if I am trying to live according to what I believe my purpose is from a place of insecure identity, then my purpose actually becomes convoluted to fulfill something that is lacking in me to begin with, rather than my purpose actually being rooted in a place of being able to give from a place of freedom. And then my purpose of inevitably, I'm like operating from the shadow side. We've talked about this a couple of times, where for every great light, there is a great shadow. So maybe we have some great, beautiful, incredible purpose in our lives, but if we have not done the work to create the foundation upon which we will then stand and then operate from and then give from that place, our purpose is going to be kind of colored by the fear of that which we do not have security in. So that knowledge of I am loved, I am chosen, I am desired, I belong, that's identity part A. And then B, this is my unique skill set. This is my unique gifting. This is what gives me life. This is what lights me up. And let me actually first tend to that empty glass, that empty vessel that is the inner state of you and me. Let me fill that up. And then from the overflow of that, I'm going to propel it into my mission and extend it into the corners of the world for so long as my mission goes there. So in order for us to live really with integrity to this question of what even is our purpose, it warrants and encourages us to actually look deeper at, well, before I even consider what is my purpose, do I know who I am to begin with? And we talked a little bit about this question yesterday in terms of who we are, but it was worthy of investigation once more tonight, because again, before we ask this question of what is my purpose, we have to take a step back and consider, do I even know who I am to begin with? Just before I jump into today's lesson, I want to jump into the chat. Brian, I'm so grateful to see you. Y'all, we've made a change lately in the last couple of days where we've just been turning on comments for those who have subscribed for over 24 hours. We have a lot of trolls that come on here. And we're just kind of doing this as a test just to see like what does it look like, and how does the conversation change when it's folks who are genuinely here rather than just kind of trolling. So I'm curious, for those of you who have been around for a bit, how do you guys like the chat when it's kind of free of clutter? Wayne, I'm so happy to see you. I miss Maine. Living there was such a beautiful experience. That's where my kids reside. I love you, my friend. Thank you for joining. And I can only imagine. I'd love to know, where did you live in Maine? I was in Belfast a couple days ago and then went to Bar Harbor, and it was stunning. And I went through, actually went through Portland on our way up the coast. But man, Maine is gorgeous. It's so, so, so beautiful. Um, Thank you. Thank you, Wayne. Chipablo, hello, good to see you. Christopher Adams, hello, my friend. To intimately know and serve God lovingly, just as well as doing unto others through acts of humility and love, are certainly the purpose of being a Christian. That's so beautiful. That's so beautifully said. I love that you said to intimately know and then serve. And service really is service, man. When we give, we receive. And there's been a number of conversations around that over the last couple of months that have really helped me, because it is easy to have this narrative that's actually very cultural today, which is when you're giving, it actually leaves you more empty than before. But man, is that a complete dynamic shift of this whole concept of service, that to give is actually to receive. It's almost like that which we pour out, we receive in return. And it's kind of cause and effect in so many ways. But we've just viewed as a culture this very selfish narrative of what you give, you no longer have. So it really kind of breeds this selfish intent. And frankly, it's really coming from a place of scarcity. And so I'm so grateful that you said that, Christopher, because I think that really does change a lot. Appearing phenomena, hello, good to see you. What do you see when people are doing their best, pulling you down literally 24/7? It's interesting. Appearing phenomena. We were talking about. We're in Maine and the New Hampshire, New England area, and my darling was talking to his boys about the Salem witch trials, and we were talking about how those trials, how they started, were kind of rooted in, they were rooted in slander. They were rooted in jealousy. Women were actually having a bit of jealousy going on between them and other women, but it was also just complete slander, total gossip. And it was not at all rooted in facts. It was simply based off of someone else's experience. And so a lot of detrimental acts across humanity are done by multiple reasons, but this one in particular, it was just really devastating, looking at kind of the root cause of something that took the lives of so many people. And it had kind of a very almost silly genesis. And so it forces us to consider with responsibility of, man, what are the words coming out of my mouth, and what is the impact that they have on others? But before we can know our purpose, before we can really serve, it's looking in the mirror to consider with responsibility, through the lens of responsibility, of what is going on inside of me and how am I showing up. So to your point of when people are doing their best, pulling you down, I think it speaks to areas in their lives that probably need to be loved on and cared for. But man, if I'm having a reaction to what they're doing, I cannot control what they're doing, what they're saying, how they're showing up. And in this space, me putting some boundaries up with, who can comment, I can do some things, but I can't do a lot. And so to that point of people trying to pull each other down, what we can control is our response. Viktor Frankl, he authored the book Man's Search for Meaning, and it was around the time of the German concentration. He was in the German concentration camp when he at least started authoring this book. And he says between stimulus and response is choice. And so it is our responsibility to determine our choice. We can't control the stimulus. However, I've found, it's funny, I'm just glad you brought this up, appearing phenomena, because I've really found that the things that people are triggering in me, I'm like, man, that was there to begin with. It was just waiting, for the perfect storm. And so in one sense, man, that person, thank goodness I had this exposed in me. Thank goodness I now know, so that I can go and tend to my own stuff that was reacting to what they did. So I think that nearly impossible for us to know someone else's intention, yet it is possible for us to come to know the truth of what's going on inside of us. And then we can do something about it and seek real change. Mr. Martinez, hello. I'm so glad you're here. Christopher Adams, this is so beautiful. As Jesus is the sole mediation between us and the Almighty Father, is the Greek word, I'm going to butcher this, akolathia, which means to walk beside. If we follow behind someone, we fall behind. So we walk beside him instead. Ah, that's so beautiful. Wow. And you know, let's just go here since we're already kind of on the subject. You know, that concept of being able to walk alongside actually means that we're elevated to that position, and that God has effectively given us that kind of status of, yeah, brothers and sisters in Christ, which is just insane that we get that status and that level, which then speaks to, okay, well then what is my purpose? Why am I here? Because if I have the ability to walk at that level of royalty and power, man, then there must be something really important that I am to do with my life. Christopher Adams, I didn't know you were in Bar Harbor. I forgot you were from Maine. Oh, I love this. Wayne says, when you give, you're giving to yourself. I lived in a town called Walterboro, Maine. It's near Rockland. Oh, right by the ocean. Nice. Man, Wayne, I'm with you. Gosh. I'm sure Viktor Frankl knew him. All right, y'all, we're going to go ahead and read today's lesson. Lesson 192. I have a function God would have me fill. It is your Father's holy will that you complete himself, and that yourself shall be his sacred Son, forever pure as he, of love created and in love preserved, extending love, creating in its name, forever one with God and with yourself. Yet what can such a function mean within a world of envy, hatred, and attack? Therefore, you have a function in the world in its own terms. For who can understand a language far beyond his simple grasp? Forgiveness represents your function here. It is not God's creation, for it is the means by which untruth can be undone. And who would pardon heaven? Yet on earth, you need the means to let illusions go. Creation merely waits for your return to be acknowledged, not to be complete. Creation cannot even be conceived of in the world. It has no meaning here. Forgiveness is the closest it can come to earth. For being heaven-born, it has no form at all. Yet God created one who has the power to translate in form the wholly formless. What he makes are dreams, but of a kind so close to waking that the light of day already shines in them, and eyes already opening behold the joyful sights their offerings contain. Forgiveness gently looks upon all things unknown in heaven, sees them disappear, and leaves the world a clean and unmarked slate on which the word of God can now replace the senseless symbols written there before. Forgiveness is the means by which the fear of death is overcome. Because it holds no fierce attraction now and guilt is gone, forgiveness lets the body be perceived as what it is, a simple teaching aid to be laid by when learning is complete, but hardly changing him who learns it all. The mind without the body cannot make mistakes. It cannot think that it will die, nor be the prey of merciless attack. Anger becomes impossible, and where is real terror then? What fears could still assail those who have lost the source of all attack and the core of anguish and the seed of fear? Only forgiveness can relieve the mind of thinking that the body is its home. Only forgiveness can restore the peace that God intended for his holy Son. Only forgiveness can persuade the Son to look again upon his holiness. With anger gone, you will indeed perceive that. For Christ's vision and this gift of sight, no sacrifice was asked, and only pain was lifted from a sick and tortured mind. Is this unwelcome? Is it to be feared? Or is it to be hoped for, met with thanks, and joyously accepted? We are one, and therefore give up nothing. But we have indeed been given everything by God. Yet do we need forgiveness to perceive that this is so. Without its kindly light, we grope in darkness, using reason but to justify our rage and our attack. Our understanding is so limited that what we think we understand is but confusion born of error. We are lost in mists of shifting dreams and fearful thoughts, our eyes shut tight against the light, our minds engaged in worshiping what is not there. Who can be born again in Christ but him who has forgiven everyone he sees or thinks of or imagines? Who could be set free while he imprisons anyone? Wow. A jailer is not free, for he is bound together with his prisoner. He must be sure that he does not escape, and so he spends his time in keeping watch on him. The bars that limit him becomes the world in which the jailer lives, along with him. And it is on his freedom that the way to liberty depends for both of them. Therefore, hold no one prisoner. Release instead of bind, for thus are you made free. The way is simple. Every time you feel a stab of anger, realize you hold a sword above your head, and it will fall or be averted as you choose to be condemned or free. Thus does each one who seems to tempt you to be angry represent your Savior from the prison house of death. And so you owe him thanks instead of pain. Wow. Be merciful today. The Son of God deserves your mercy. It is he who asks that you accept the way to freedom now. Deny him not. His Father's love for him belongs to you. Your function here on earth is only to forgive him, that you may accept him back as your identity. He is as God created him, and you are what he is. Forgive him now his sins, and you will see that you are one with him. Wow, y'all. I was reminded as we were reading today's lesson, we talked a little bit about our identity. We talked about these two parts. Part A, which is this kind of universal, eternal part of us that is loved and chosen and accepted regardless, no matter what. And that is shared by every single one of us. And then part B is actually the thing that makes us very unique, the thing that does separate us, that makes us kind of stand out in so many ways based on our unique gifts and skill sets and talents. And just like that, kind of in the internal part of our identity, our purpose is actually somewhat similar, where each one of us holds universal purpose, a universal, almost like commandment, so to say, where it's, if we have loved much, we are to forgive much. So this part A of our identity that is universally shared, that we are loved and we are accepted and we are chosen, that is an aspect of our purpose that is the thing which we are to model. And it says this here, which I just thought was brilliantly stated. Only forgiveness can relieve the mind of thinking that the body is its home. Only forgiveness can restore the peace that God intended for his Holy Son. Only forgiveness can persuade the Son to look again upon his holiness. Y'all, forgiveness is an underlying, internal, universal purpose of our lives. It's effectively to restore that which has been separated. It's the unifying nature of love. And so if we're loved, we are to then be love. And that just goes without saying almost. It's kind of like, well, that makes sense. If we have loved much, we must forgive much and love much to others. So yes, each one of us, I don't know about you, I want to know my purpose and I want to walk in it. Yet starting at kind of the baseline, same thing with the question of, okay, well, who are you? Well, knowing that we're loved, and that same with everybody else, that we're actually very, very much so children of God, and we're made like our Creator, and those almost like universal principles, starting at a very basic foundation, then we go on to say, okay, well, who am I uniquely made to be? How am I to show up in the world? How am I different? But we kind of start off with just this beautiful recognition, man, that we were made very much like each other. And what a blessing that is, that there is so much love to be shared. So then the same goes for our purpose, recognizing, okay, if my identity, A, has this element of being loved, well, then my purpose as a manifestation of that identity is to then love, to forgive much, to remind myself of that eternal aspect that takes me out of this physical world sometimes when, man, it's just so incredibly hard. And to remember that this isn't the end of the story. And so that is really, really important to kind of speak to that, is that, yes, then we can get to, okay, well, what's my purpose for me specifically as an individual based on my identity and those individual gifts, how I am uniquely created, what separates me from everybody else. How does my purpose then differ as a result of my unique identity? Yet, y'all, if we're not doing the thing that, if we're not aware of the thing that binds us together in the first place, then knowing our identity as it pertains to who we are as individuals and knowing our purpose as it pertains to who we are as individuals can really actually be the thing that further drives separation and isolation from each other, from even the source of love. Like, if Christ is in all and we are made like him, then to cut ourselves off from certain people actually can be the very thing that cuts us off from access to hope, from joy, from even the reminder and the reflection of, oh yeah, that is who I am. And so we get further and further from the truth as we separate ourselves from people around us. And this line, man, so well said. And I just want to come back to this because it really speaks to this concept around, okay, well, let's remember what our purpose is. Who can be born again in Christ, but who has forgiven everyone he sees or thinks of or imagines? Who could be set free while he imprisons another? A jailer is not free, for he is bound together with his prisoner. He must be sure that he does not escape, and so he spends his time in keeping watch on him. The bars that limit him become the world in which his jailer lives, along with him. And it is on his freedom that the way to liberty depends for both of them. Y'all, the more we are actually living in accordance with that kind of like identity A piece and purpose A aspect, it frees us and everybody around us to then walk in the individual purpose and individual identity, to then kind of like, man, I'm free to soar. I'm free to explore, to get curious, because I'm no longer bound by fear. I'm no longer bound in resentment or in anger. You know, I actually, I want to, I'm Googling something right now. Okay, so tonight we were driving and I had a 9-year-old ask me, what is resentment? And I was like, oh, I've actually never described resentment before. And I gave this little example, and I Googled it now just to make sure that I wasn't too far off base. I mean, of course, the Cambridge Dictionary does a better job than me, but I want to share the example that I gave first, and then I'll add to it. The example that I gave was, effectively, resentment is something usually that builds up over time. It's usually the result of not being aware or honest when we started engaging with somebody. So maybe we said yes to something, but a little part of us didn't want to, or a little part of us was annoyed. And then, man, we do it again. And then that little part, it grows. So resentment is something that starts off small and then grows over time. It like compounds. So just like how we talk on the show about how what we put out, we yield return on our investment. Resentment is the result of internal investments in negative, honestly, hurtful, anger, all of those kind of internal negative emotions that we're feeling. It compounds over time. So resentment is a compounding effect of internal work that has never been done. And thus it ends up becoming actually more harmful for the other people around us, because they had no idea to begin with that we were struggling. And then by the time resentment finally comes out, it's usually too late. So this concept of real freedom that comes on the other side of forgiveness, it is so incredibly true, because now I am no longer bound to you by my own resentment. And I want to read the definition here. A feeling of anger because you have been forced to accept something you do not like. There's very little in adulthood that we are forced to accept. And really, and feel free to jump here in the chat and say, what are we forced to accept other than death or something of the like? Most things in our life, when we really, really sit and think about it, we have the autonomy to choose. And even still, even if all human freedom is stripped away, akin to, and kind of hearkening back to Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, all human freedom can be stripped away, yet the internal power of choice remains to choose how we respond. So resentment in some ways is actually the very antithesis of autonomy to choose a better path. It's this feeling of kind of victimhood that lends to this concept of I'm powerless, I don't have a voice, and then everyone else in our life is paying the price for that. Just jumping here in the chat. See Martin Love. Oh, I'm so glad to see you. It's been a while. Good to see you. Oh, yay. All right, scrolling down. Wayne, that's so good. I agree. A lot of people who live for reactions. That's why they bait you, trying to trigger insecurities. Appearing phenomena says, what is hate? Hate comes from hurt feelings. Hurting people hurt people. That's so good. Paxton, yay. I'm glad to see you. It's been a while as well. I know I haven't been on regularly. I'm hoping. I'm on vacation this week, and so I'm hoping. I was thinking this morning, tonight, I was like, I need to start doing the shows again in the morning because I've been tired the last couple of nights. I love this, Christopher Adams. That bit about the jailer is so true. In Roman times, a high-profile prisoner was typically chained to a soldier, linking the soldier's fate to the prisoner if they tried to escape. Jeez. That's so good. That's so good. And so applicable to this picture of effectively that whom we have not forgiven, we are forever tethered to. To forgive is to set a prisoner free and discover that the prisoner was you. Word. Wow. That's so good. But people say we're dirty, rotten sinners, and some say we're beyond redemption as well. Man, I actually think that that's a very, my dad, oh my gosh, I should have my dad on the show. I'm going to do that if he's willing. I would love, 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 love to have him come on here. And frankly, we would go way deep spiritual, which we don't always do here on the show. So I'll give fair warning and you guys cannot join if you don't want to. But one of the things that my dad had, the reason why I like that word spirit is because I have found that that's kind of the pathway to revelation where otherwise we would never know. People have really had genuine ideas where it's like, how did you come up with that? It's like completely revealed in some ways. And then you see people from across the globe, across time, who've never met each other, where they have had similar revelations. And, there's something about the spirit that's so important. And so I would say that my dad has had a revelation specifically around that appearing phenomena where it's the old covenant, which is effectively the relationship of God with his people and that those promises associated versus the new covenant. And that just completely changed my dad's life. It completely has, frankly, it's changed my life. And I can tell just such a stark difference of almost like a before and after type of thinking, where, man, to your point, it's like, oh gosh, we're free. That concept of the jailer, we are entirely free if we so choose. It's almost like it's our choice to walk in the freedom that's being offered us in the new covenant. Monty Logan, hello. Free to fly in the Millennium Falcon. Caleb Castro, hello. Girl, I've been in complete darkness for a long time, and I find that God's presence in my life is closest in my hardest time, and I love the hardest times the most. Wow. Caleb, man, that's just it's so honest, and I resonate a lot with that, and I've heard other people share that too. I write a little bit about this in my book, Knowing, where it really is, it's like the veil thins between heaven and earth when we're in that level of pain, where it's like, man, I am experiencing something so much more visceral because of the visceral depth of sorrow. And all of a sudden it's like it opens us to receive that which we need from kind of that spiritual place where it's like, I need revelation because I am so broken right now. And man, I just resonate a lot with that. James Alva, hello, my friend. I'm so glad to see you. Appearing phenomena, but at what point do you walk away from a fool? Is it not unforgiving and uncompassionate? I'm looking to see the rest of the comments. Okay, so Christopher Adams says, when you forgive someone, you're really releasing the debt of wrong deeds they inflicted upon you. By so doing, this gives the opportunity to find healing for yourself. And forgiveness does not mean, actually, compassion is empathy in action. So I actually think we can extend empathy for that person. We can extend forgiveness to that person, become free from them. And in so doing, it releases their power and hold over you, which frankly can be sometimes the most loving thing. And then, because compassion is empathy in action, empathy does not beget action in terms of like, you actually can have empathy apart from action. But man, to have real compassion take place, there usually does follow some real action that needs to be done when somebody, if to use your word fool, if that is the case, well, perhaps it does warrant real action in addition to kind of that internal heart transformation. Y'all, the court of law is very important. Truth must be honored and upheld, but it is the internal state that is our responsibility, that is kind of that chief aim and purpose of forgiveness and love. I can do an action that is rooted in love and rooted in fear, and that actually may not look different. It might actually look very similar, but my heart posture is the thing that changes. And then the action itself, it might look very, very similar to that the next day if I'm acting out of fear. So it's my responsibility to understand, know, control what's going on inside of me. And then the action, man, it's also our duty. Talk about our purpose. The action and kind of the external purpose and the manifestation of the internal soil and the internal state of our lives, that's kind of the spillage. It's the overflow. So the quantity and quality of the health which we exhibit in our external life usually is a reflection of the internal. At the same time, forgiveness does not mean we do not take action when somebody has repeatedly done something. We need the court of law. Thank God for it. Resentment leads to fear, and fear leads to anger, and anger leads to the dark side. Monty. That's so good. James. Oh, thank you. Wow. That's very meaningful. Thank you, my friend. If you spend time hoping someone will suffer the consequences for what they did to your heart, then you're allowing them to hurt you a second time in your mind. Ooh. That's good, C. Martin Love. Compassionate people ask for what they need. They say no when they need to. And when they say yes, they mean it. They are compassionate because of their boundaries, because their boundaries keep them out of resentment. Ooh, that's good. I really, really, really love that. It's so true. It's protection. This is why I say, like, it's actually for the good of the other person, for us to be honest and do the work to free them of them having that much power over us, to pull the trigger, to activate us, to hurt us like that. It's actually loving to them when we protect ourselves from resentment by the boundaries that we put in place. West, good to see you. Christopher Adams says, I've had this saying for a while. Pride is a prison cell with an open door. It's the one thing holding you back from acting in love, but there's warning that the door will shut at the moment of death. Love is an active pursuit. So beautifully stated. I've always heard love is a verb, not a noun. And true meaningful love really is, it's a spillage over from the internal state. And you can tell when something's rooted in love and when it's not. Love should be natural. Perry, it's good to see you. I'm glad you're here. Y'all, thank you so much for joining. I really, really loved tonight's conversation. I will see you all tomorrow. I'm hoping to go live in the morning. We're checking out of the Airbnb, so we'll see. But thank you for joining. Have a good night.